Guys, I'm really sorry I haven't uploaded in over a week. Some of you probably don't even care. But yeah, what with a newborn baby, I'm really tired. The bags under my eyes could house testicles. Word to your mother, my name's Steve, this channel is Frags to Riches. Thank you for tuning in, as always. I love you for doing so. Now today's video is one of those videos that I'm basically doing it for my own curiosity really, but I thought I'd stick on the camera anyway and share my findings because it might be helpful for some people out there. So today we are looking at Bvlgari Man In Black. We're also looking at Spicebomb from Viktor Rolf, and I've also got a sample of Spicebomb Extreme. Now, this is one of those things, as I say, I've always kind of wanted to do, and I actually bought this Bulgari Man In Black especially for this video, but it's more from my own curiosity. So I've owned Spicebomb for quite a long time. I've smelt Man In Black and Spicebomb Extreme in store, but I've never done a full-on side-by-side comparison and kind of analysed them and broke it down and fully got my head around the differences, what's better, what works when, and ultimately which is my favourite. So that's what I'm going to do today. So let's start with the original Spicebomb EDP from Viktor Rolf. Now, this is the fragrance I've owned the longest because I've had this in my collection for quite a few months now, and the other two I've actually bought especially for this comparison. So I've always thought, I've smelt the other two previously just in store, but I've always thought that this is my favourite. So I really wanted to test all three fragrances side by side to make sure that, yeah, this definitely is my favourite. So you'll find out later at the end of the video. So this opens up surprisingly quite fresh in the opening. Right at the top, I sprayed some on my hand just a moment ago. It's sort of quite fresh, almost zesty, lively opening, and then it slowly starts getting spicier and sweeter. So the spice starts coming through, and so does the sweetness. Now the sweetness, though it is a synthetic sweetness, I wouldn't say I don't find it particularly cloying or sickly, even though it is actually quite bubblegummy. I find the sweetness with this really comforting. I find it is a very cozy, comforting, reassuring, pleasant sweetness. The sweet and the spice on this is a great name because it just blends together kind of perfectly. I think it's just a great balance of sweet and spice, and it works really well. As I say, I often wear this in the evenings when I just want to feel cozy, but this is also quite an attractive fragrance. It could be quite a fun fragrance. It's the sort of thing that you might wear going out to a bar or to a club, or just kind of socializing with friends. So it's probably, yeah, you could get away, anybody in their 20s into their 30s could kind of enjoy this fragrance, and I very much do. Next up is Bvlgari Man In Black, which regularly gets compared to Spicebomb. I think like for like, price-wise, this is actually cheaper, but yeah, this regularly gets compared to Spicebomb, and I can see why. Some people say I don't get any comparison, but I do. I can see why people compare them because the spiciness of it is quite similar. I'm just going to spray some on my hand just to kind of remind myself. What I will say is it's got added booze, so this has got like a boozy rum note in this fragrance, and that really does make the difference, I think. And that and the spice in this is a lot harsher on the nose, I would say. Now, harsh is maybe a bit of a harsh word, I guess, because it's not a harsh fragrance as such, but the sweet spice from Spicebomb is just very easy on the nose. As I said, it's very soft, it's very comforting, it's very appealing and luring. It's a lot less easy on the nose. Now, I'm not saying this is challenging, I'm not saying it's harsh or unpleasant, because I like this fragrance without a doubt. But the booziness in it, basically, the spiciness is sharper. It's sharper in spice. I would say, if I try to balance the three elements, I'd say it's less sweet, the spiciness is sharper, and then once you add that booze in, it's quite a full-on, attention-grabbing fragrance that I say it's definitely not as easy on the nose. It's kind of a bit sharper, a bit more noticeable, and the sort of booze and the sharper spice makes this a bit more mature in my opinion. I think this is more for guys in their 30s into their 40s. And again, anybody can wear any fragrance, I'm not saying you can't, but if I had to kind of put it into an age group, that's what I'd say. But again, it's a lovely fragrance. It is definitely more sophisticated than Spicebomb. Where Spicebomb is somebody in their 20s, in the sort of bar, in the club, or with their friends. This is more of a guy in their sort of 30s to 40s who's kind of sophisticated. They're having like a whiskey in a wine bar, like a trendy kind of place or something like that, or maybe a formal dinner. Somebody could even like work well in a tuxedo or dinner jacket or something like that. It's a lot more kind of sophisticated and a bit more mature. But the opening, as I say, is a bit harsher on the nose, but again, it does dry down to a really kind of lovely fragrance. The booze does ease off a little bit, and then you're left with this quite sharp spice that's not as sweet as Spicebomb. So next up is Spicebomb Extreme. Now again, I've smelt this numerous times in store, but I've never owned a decant or sample. I've never given it a full proper wear-in until the research I've been doing for this video. And you know what? I've enjoyed it a lot actually. I've enjoyed wearing this, and I'm sort of got a newfound respect, because the issue I have with Spicebomb Extreme, now actually before I get into that, let me just say this is definitely the most different. So as a flanker, this is a brilliant flanker in my opinion, because it takes some of that original Spicebomb DNA, but it goes in a different direction, where Spicebomb I think works quite well in, as I say, in a club or cooler weather, sort of autumn. Spicebomb Extreme works really well in winter, but it also is a lot more sophisticated than Spicebomb. They've taken the original DNA and they've gone in a slightly different direction. So I actually think, as a flankers go, this is a brilliant flanker, and it is the most dissimilar to the other two. So Man in Black and Spicebomb are comparable. With this, I think stands out in its own right, and I think you could comfortably own this as well as one of the other two, but we'll get onto that later. So what I will say is probably what's put me off whenever I've smelt it in store is I find I don't enjoy the opening too much on this, surprisingly. The tobacco is quite strong for me in the opening, and what with a bit of the sweetness, a bit of the tobacco, the tobacco is quite strong, some of the spice, and then the sort of creamy vanilla kind of creamier side of it. In the opening, there's a lot going on, and it's a bit, for me, like a bit of an overload, a bit of a sensory overload, and that's possibly why I've always, I wouldn't say I've written this off, but I've never really got into it until giving it a full wear-in, because once it dries down, that is when the magic happens for this. Once this sort of just dries down a little bit, it really sort of comes into its own, and it, as I say, it stands out as a definitive flanker to Spicebomb, the original, and I think it's worthy owning this as well. So, as I say, this is a different fragrance to the other two, so it's not really comparable, but it does have some of the original Spicebomb. It's nowhere near as sweet. It's obviously got the tobacco element to it and that sort of creamier side. So the sweetness comes more from like this creamy vanilla rather than this quite bubblegummy synthetic sweetness that you get in a Spicebomb. And once it dries down, you're left with this lovely creamy tobacco. It's not too sweet. It's just a very nice, sophisticated fragrance. Again, just to put into situations, I think age-wise this could work for anybody. I think anybody in their 20s, 30s, 40s could wear this one. But for situation-wise, in my head, I picture like Man in Black, as I say, sort of tuxedo, dinner jacket, quite sophisticated wine bar. Spicebomb, I see a younger person in their 20s in a pub or in a club. Spicebomb Extreme, I feel like it's more sophisticated. You could wear to like a dinner date, like going on a date with a lady, a nice meal somewhere. It's not as formal as Man in Black, but it's just got some nice sophistication to it. And the creamy tobacco is a lovely, enjoyable fragrance. So before I get onto my final verdict and opinions, I just want to talk about performance of each of these fragrances, which has been really interesting actually, because a lot of my preconceptions and my expectations have been completely altered. Now, my Spicebomb, the EDT, the original from Viktor Rolf, I checked the batch code and this is a 2019 batch, early 2019, and this performs really well on my skin. A lot of people say that this doesn't, but for me, this lasts really well. I can get 7-8 hours out of this and it projects really well for quite a long time. At the end of the day, at the 7 or 8 hour mark, I can still get wafts of this, but it still projects very strongly in sort of 2-3 hours. The first 2-3 hours, I get really strong projection, quite good sillage, and it lasts. So I've got absolutely no issues with the performance of this. It works really well and it performs really well. Bvlgari Man In Black is, I would say the performance is not as good on my skin as Spicebomb, the original, but it's not bad. I would say it's more like the sort of 5 to 6 hours. It felt fairly typical, I would say. I didn't notice it for being short-lived, and I didn't notice it for being beast mode. It just felt fairly typical, quite average performance really. It projected for an hour or two, and then it lasted 5-6 hours. But it wasn't as strong and noticeable as the original Spicebomb. Spicebomb Extreme is a funny one, because I'm telling you now, on my skin, this does not project nowhere near as much as the original Spicebomb. So it's noticeable, and I get regular wafts. I guess it's that classic EDP versus EDT type situation, because this just feels like it wears a lot closer. The projection is not great actually, it's quite close wear, and I do kind of get a few wafts of it when I'm wearing it, but it does seem to last. Initially, from the first kind of spray, when I literally just give myself a little spray, I thought, oh, it's just gone like quite quickly after a couple of hours. But then when I actually gave it a full proper wear and full sprays around the neck, etc., I could smell it for most of the day, but it did wear fairly close. I just kind of get wafts of it. I would say that, strangely, the Spicebomb, the original, outperformed it for me. The projection was stronger, it was more noticeable, and it lasted just as long, if not a bit longer. I think this did last similar length of time, 7 or 8 hours, but it was a lot more of a skin scent at the end compared to this. I don't know, it might just be my skin, because I hear lots of stories about this being beast and this being shit, but what can I say? It is what I found. Right, so what's my verdict? What is my favourite? Is it still Spicebomb, the original EDT, when it comes to these 3 fragrances? And you know what? It is, actually. If I had to only pick one of these 3 fragrances to own, I would pick the original Spicebomb from Viktor Rolf. I get great performance from it, and I just find that bubblegummy sweetness just really enjoyable. It's really comforting, yet when I just want to snuggle, but it's also sort of quite alluring and attractive and fun as well. It can easily be a sort of sexy, appealing date type fragrance if you want it to be. So I just really enjoy this fragrance, and it offers some versatility as well. You can wear it in the cooler months, not in the heat of summer probably, it'd be a bit too much. But if the rest of the year, you're probably good. Spring, autumn, even winter, I mean, it performs really well on me. So yeah, this is still my pick. Now, when it comes to the other 2, what I would say is, again, you could own all 3, and there's a case to own all 3, because Bvlgari's Man In Black is definitely different enough that you could own it. But personally, I would choose Spicebomb over Man In Black, which is hard for me to say being a Bulgari fanboy. But if I own Spicebomb and I don't feel the need for Man In Black, I'd happily wear Spicebomb. But it does stand aside. It is more sophisticated and it is more formal, I think, and probably more mature. Spicebomb Extreme, I think there's easily a case to own both Spicebomb and Spicebomb Extreme. As I said earlier, it's a flanker that goes in a different direction and it stands in its own right compared to the original. So I think you could comfortably own both the Spicebomb and the Extreme flanker. So there you go. If I had to put these 3 fragrances in order, I would go for Spicebomb, followed by Spicebomb Extreme, then Bvlgari's Man In Black. Now, I hope you found this video useful. I know these fragrances are quite old now, so most of you have probably smelt them and you've done and dusted with them. But as I say, this is something I wanted to do for me and my own curiosity, so I thought I'd just film it and share my findings. If you did get anything out of this, do hit that like button, I'd really appreciate it. And if you are new to this channel, it'd be great if you could subscribe. Welcome into my little family. I don't know why I did that, that's a bit creepy. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you for the next video. Take care, much love.